Senate rejects 7-day sick leave for railway workers, and now they cannot strike for it. Democrats elect Hakeem Jeffries as first Black Congressional Party leader. Washington, D.C.'s Muslim-Jewish firefighters sue over policy banning beards. British Census says 39% of Muslims live in most deprived areas of the UK. A 6-volume repository, an Islamic Encyclopedia, gets a new edition. UAE to become first Muslim country to land Rover on the moon. From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight: the U.S. Senate on Thursday passed legislation brokered by President Joe Biden denying freight rail employees any compensated sick leave. Now, labor advocates are urging the president to sign an executive order guaranteeing at least 7 days of paid sick leave to railroad and other workers. Biden has called himself the most pro-labor president ever. The Senate voted 52 to 43 Thursday, 8 votes short of the 60 needed for the passage of the House-approved proposal. The House bill was introduced by Representative Jamal Bowman, a New York Democrat. It gives rail workers 7 paid sick days as part of a tentative contract. Congress and the Biden administration are forcing railway workers to take the deal under the terms of the Railway Labor Act of 1926. They seek to avoid a crippling rail strike around the holidays. Senators voted 80 to 15 in favor of a Biden-brokered tentative agreement without a single sick day. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and 42 Republicans voted down the proposal to include 7 paid sick days. A New York jury is considering conviction of the Trump Organization on tax fraud cases. An appeals court halted a special master review of documents seized at Mar-a-Lago. Now the Justice Department can review the documents for its investigation into the mishandling of government records during Donald Trump's presidency. A federal judge has ordered former top lawyers in Trump's White House to testify in a criminal grand jury probe. Meanwhile, the Democratic-controlled U.S. House Ways and Means Committee has received 6 years of the former president's federal tax returns. Trump fought fiercely for 3 years against sharing the documents. The Internal Revenue Service handed over Trump's returns Wednesday. It comes a week after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected Trump's bid to prevent the House committee from obtaining the filings. A 2020 New York Times investigation found Trump did not pay any federal income tax in 10 out of 15 years beginning in 2000. Democratic lawmakers on Wednesday chose Hakeem Jeffries to succeed Nancy Pelosi as their leader in the House of Representatives. Jeffries is the first Black person to ever lead a U.S. congressional caucus. The 52-year-old has been in the Democratic leadership since 2019. He ran unopposed in the closed-door vote. The New York congressman's election marks a generational shift for the Democrats. Jeffries is 30 years junior to Pelosi. New faces were also elected to the number 2 and 3 positions. Pelosi said this new generation of leaders reflects the vibrancy and diversity of our great nation. She announced earlier in November that she would step down from her post as leader in January. Republicans will take control of the chamber after their midterm election wins. A group of Muslim and Jewish firefighters in Washington, D.C. have asked a judge to hold the city in contempt for a policy that bans beards. They say it unfairly targets the minority faiths of Islam and Judaism. The plaintiffs are Stephen Chassin, Calvert Potter, Jasper Sterling, and Hassan Omrani. The firefighters filed a motion this month in a district court. They claimed that they were removed from duty, reassigned, and received less compensation because they refused to abide by a 2020 policy prohibiting facial hair. The men each have a beard in accordance with the tenets of their faiths. The men challenged a similar restriction using the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 more than a decade ago, according to court filings. A Muslim cemetery south of the Twin Cities is a step closer to being realized. The Al-Maghfirah Cemetery Association received a conditional use permit in June to develop burial plots and a funeral home on land purchased in 2014. It comes after 8 years of vandalism and legal battles over land use. The 72-acre plot in Castle Rock, Minnesota, is expected to house nearly 50,000 burial plots. It will serve Muslims from the Twin Cities and suburban metro areas. The cemetery would be the largest of its kind in Minnesota, dedicated to Muslim burial. Mohammed Usman, president of the Cemetery Association, said initially 5 acres of the land will be cleared to accommodate about 5,000 burial plots. A parking lot, walking paths, and an Islamic center for funeral prayers and rites also are part of the plan. The first step of development is projected to cost $4.3 million and is expected to start in March 2023. British Census says 39% of Muslims live in the most deprived areas of the United Kingdom. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. The latest British census shows 39% of Muslims are now living in the most deprived areas of England and Wales. Advocates are urging policymakers to act on the cycle of poverty entrapping generations of British Muslims. People who identify as Muslim have increased by 1.2 million in 10 years. The overall Muslim population was 3.9 million in 2021, the census shows. Muslims now make up 6.5% of the population in England and Wales, up from 4.9% in 2011. The Muslim population has started to disperse away from urban centers. The latest census reveals areas with the worst levels of deprivation also have a high percentage share of Muslims. Data shows 61% of Muslims in England and Wales live in the lowest 40% of areas ranked by deprivation score. The United Nations has appealed for record funds for aid next year. The call comes amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war and other conflicts, climate emergencies, and pandemic-related crises. The UN Annual Global Humanitarian Overview estimated 339 million people worldwide will need some emergency assistance next year. That's a staggering 65 million more people than the estimate a year ago. If all people needing emergency assistance were in one country, it would be the third largest nation after China and India. 1 in 23 people will need help in 2023. Compared to 1 in 95 in 2015. The annual appeal by UN agencies and other humanitarian organizations said $51.5 billion is needed to provide aid to the 230 million most vulnerable people on Earth. A 6-volume Islamic encyclopedia has been launched in Istanbul. The Atlas of Islamic Thought, launched November 30th, is a new and comprehensive edition of an encyclopedia first published in 2017. The collection aims to serve as a repository of Islamic thoughts and philosophy over centuries. Istanbul once was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The encyclopedia includes a website in Turkish. It also summarizes significant achievements of Islamic thought and philosophy. More than 200 academics, researchers, historians, designers, software developers, and survey engineers helped compile it. The Atlas highlights a period not covered in traditional historical sources that portray a Eurocentric worldview. It features Islamic cities that were capitals of global philosophy between the 7th century and 17th century. That's when the Islamic world encompassed people who spoke Arabic, Turkish, Farsi, and Urdu. The Taliban has banned American-funded Voice of America and Radio Free Europe radio broadcasts on FM stations in Afghanistan. Authorities cited complaints that they have received about programming content. The ban went into effect December 1st, according to a directive issued by Taliban's Ministry of Information and Culture. Taliban spokespeople have not provided further details about the alleged complaints against the US-funded news programs. It is unclear whether the ban will apply to other international broadcasters. Earlier this year, the Taliban banned Voice of America Dari and Pashto language television shows on the private Tolo News channel. Voice of America Dari and Pashto radio shows first started in the 1980s. They reached millions of listeners across Afghanistan. The British government has condemned the torture of a Jordanian national on death row in Saudi Arabia for drug offenses. British leaders called it abhorrent and demanded an end to a sudden spate of executions in the kingdom. It's the first time the British government has made such allegations. Foreign Office Minister David Rutley told Parliament London has raised Hussein Abu al-Khair's case at the highest level. The move comes after mounting pressure urging British leaders to comment on the matter. Saudi Arabia had previously committed to not imposing the death penalty for drug offenses, but lately it has suddenly resumed executions. Khair, who is represented by the campaign group Reprieve, was moved to a death row cell more than a week ago. He was arrested in 2014 for smuggling narcotics when crossing the Jordanian border into Saudi Arabia. He claims he only confessed after being tortured. The United Arab Emirates this week became the first Muslim country to carry out a lunar mission. The UAE said Tuesday it had completed the final preparations to launch its rover to the moon. Named Rashid, it lifted off from United States Cape Canaveral Space Station in Florida on Wednesday. UAE Moon Mission Manager Hamad Al-Marzouki said that the rover is named for the Dubai's ruling family. It was launched atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket and will be deposited on the moon by iSpace Japan lunar rovers in March 2023. The UAE rover is expected to land on the unexplored surface of the Atlas crater in April 2023. It will study many aspects of the lunar surface, including mobility and interaction with lunar particles. Israeli occupation soldiers attacked Palestinian students on their way to school in the West Bank city of Hebron, Wafa news agency reports. A group of armed soldiers fired tear gas and concussion bombs in Deir Samat village and inside the Aqqa Elementary Co-ed school, the agency said. The attack caused suffocation among dozens of students and staff members. Yasser Salah, a Palestinian Education Ministry official, confirmed the teachers managed to guide students into the school. No one was heavily injured. Aqqa Elementary Co-ed School is one of the 9 Palestinian schools in the H2 area of Hebron. It falls under Israel's civil and military control. School children have to pass through military checkpoints to access their schools. The area houses 32,000 Palestinians. It is considered the most vulnerable to Israeli forces and settler attacks. The city of Hebron houses the Ibrahimi Mosque. It is also home to roughly 160,000 Palestinians and about 800 Israeli settlers living in heavily guarded compounds. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment on the state of Twitter. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. Prominent left-wing Twitter accounts have been banned after false reports. Far-right activists have launched a campaign to report left-wing accounts for false violations. And Elon Musk has reinstated banned right-wing accounts like Donald Trump and Kanye West earlier this month. To discuss this and more, we have with us today James Hendler, who's the director of Future of Computing Institute and the Tetherless World Professor of Computer, Web, and Cognitive Sciences at RPI, and is also the director of RPI IBM Artificial Intelligence Research Collaboration. Thank you so much for being with us, Professor.
My pleasure.
So can you tell us more about whose accounts have been deactivated and why?
The issue being explored is essentially tied to the content moderation. So because Twitter gets so many messages, it uses a combination of human and machine moderation. So, for example, certain keywords may be blocked or things like that. And then a human can put in a report that says, I think what somebody has tweeted here violates the rules. When Musk came in, he reduced the number of people who were involved in the human side of that. And then many people from the right wing who really knew how to manipulate Twitter started saying, hey, we can report these accounts we don't like. And, typically what happens is they get taken down until some human looks at them and is able to say, no, it's okay. Because the impact is bigger if you allow, based on laws in a number of different countries, if you allow something to stay up that's bad, that will get you in more trouble than if you take it down and then reinstate it later. So much trolling was done, and that left many people who would be described as left-wing or in a discriminated class. So, in some countries that's religion, in some countries that's gender or race. Those people were attacked and many of their accounts were taken down.
So what happened to Twitter's trust and safety team? And who exactly is now monitoring posts? So you talked about artificial intelligence. Could you tell us a little bit more about the automation, Twitter software? For example, we've recently heard that the software failed to detect newly posted videos of the 2019 attack on mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand. And the company only removed the clips after it was alerted by the New Zealand government. So how sophisticated is this artificial intelligence, and what has happened to Twitter's safety team?
So Twitter's moderation has changed somewhat to include a little bit more video, but Twitter was primarily created around textual messages. So what they had is a lot of tools that looked for specific words or content and had sort of filters on them. So there are certain words, and it actually varies by country and other things, the severity. So it really was just taking a fairly simple transcript of what you wrote and saying, does this fail certain filters? Once video started being uploaded, that got much harder, and they have been using more sophisticated tools. The details, of course, have not been shared widely. But what has turned out to be the case was that many of the people who were in their contact monitoring centers were actually contractors. They weren't directly Twitter employees. So Musk was able to essentially just stop those contracts, thinking that his own employees and his own AI technologies would be strong enough to do this by itself. And that's been showing up not to be a very good idea. He also allowed a lot of accounts that had been banned The best known ones are on the right side, or as we might call it, Trump, Kanye, etc. But there were also those on the other side too, very progressive, etc. White supremacy, things like that. Many accounts got put back on. And then the assumption was that the new moderation would remove them correctly, but it was sort of assuming that people would be using the system fairly. And they didn't really think about attacks and ways that people can create automatic, what are called Twitter robots or Twitter, a lot of different names for them, but things that would automatically respond to things and say, hey, that's fake, that's bad, this person is violating rules. And certainly when they were tied to videos and things where a human would typically have to look at, the scale, the number of these that are happening per minute is so high that it would take thousands and thousands of people to look at everything. So you need something that triggers it. And what Musk did was he eliminated some of those triggers and then made it so that when those triggers did go, he had less people to look at them. And so a lot of people whose accounts had been banned or who had been followers of banned accounts worked now together to make other accounts get penalized.
And so what does this mean for the platform in the future? How Twitter has been used by activists, many of them from, as you said, the marginalized communities. Black Twitter has used it for human rights and civil rights right here in the United States. And this had been an alternative to controlled, like more tightly controlled mainstream media platforms or corporate-owned platforms. Now with these major changes, what will become of this? And I ask this from a human rights perspective. We've seen, for example, Facebook and its lack of moderation in countries like Burma led to actual genocide. So in India, Twitter has been, as you said, outsourced a lot, and we've been monitoring and seen how it has been misused in India. In fact, Twitter, there's been a lawsuit filed against the Indian government by Twitter before Elon Musk took over. So going back to my question, what does this mean for the platform?
You know, I wish I could answer that question, because then I would make the appropriate decisions in the stock market as to what to do and become very rich. Twitter is a very interesting platform because it has a very mixed demographic. So there are other very popular social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook and Twitter being the four in the US that are most used. And of course, there were other ones around the world. And one of the problems is that Twitter probably has the broadest reach in that sense because it hasn't been focused on a particular kind of advertising or a particular subject. And because mass media has paid attention to Twitter. So something that, say, the President of the United States puts on Twitter will get picked up and be reflected in many other media sources as well. There are some new platforms or some distributed platforms that are being used, but none of them were really ready for the scale that a migration from Twitter would cause. There's already many servers that have gone down, even with just the first people leaving Twitter. So I would say a lot of the world is taking a wait and see attitude, but is very nervous because it has played a particular niche. As we've said, it has been accessible to marginalized communities. It's been accessible to major corporations, et cetera. It hasn't used the targeted kind of advertising that some of these other systems have used, and that's changed kind of its its value, and that's what Musk claims he's going to try to push up. But so far, his experiments have not succeeded well. And typically when he has taken over a company or started a company before, there's been a lot of changes at the beginning, and then they eventually settle out. And people are just not sure if that's what's going to happen at Twitter. The kind of engineers he brought in were people who were more used to building things than building communications, don't know as much about the social impacts of these things. And of course, Twitter originally was built by technicians and learned it had to have a lot of social moderation. So I wish I could answer your question and say, this is what will happen. Many people have left Twitter. What I'd say is mostly happening is most people are keeping their Twitter accounts, but also creating alternatives and waiting to see what happens.
So one of the accounts that was shut down, Crime Think Inc., says that Elon Musk's rhetoric about free speech is willfully dishonest. In fact, he's purging anti-fascist accounts at the same time that he reinstates neo-Nazis like Bret Stephens and the neo-Nazi blogger who inspired Andres Breivik to murder 77 people. Many activists believe that Musk bought Twitter to run it into the ground. Do you agree?
I don't think he bought it to run it into the ground, but there's a long history of rich people, moguls, buying media, right? You have Murdoch buying up newspapers. You have the people who bought up Fox News and some of the other news stations. So people who get very rich, Bezos bought, Amazon bought the Washington Post. And I think Musk, being very rich, wanted to have a communication media that was sort of under his control. It's not really, most of these people take them over and they move them in a direction. They don't completely manage them. But they've moved them to either right or left or to support one group or another. And many people think that that's really why Musk wanted Twitter, because in the modern age, buying a radio station or a TV station or a set of newspapers doesn't really have the same kind of reach that buying social media does. And certainly Twitter was the only one that had any kind of reachability to be taken over by an individual, even one with as much money as Musk had. So many people think that that's really what was going on, and that now Musk is trying to figure out how he utilizes that. His own personal political leanings are very confusing. One of the first things he did was he started banning people who were criticizing Elon Musk. So, really exactly where it's going to go is hard to say, but there are a lot of people who feel his personal politics tend to be libertarian, and the US libertarian tends to move more towards the right wing than the left wing. But again, we're in early days and people are still waiting to really see.
Do you think Twitter's chaos could make political violence worse outside of the US?
I think Twitter's changes, I'm not sure if I'd say it would make political violence worse. What I think happens is there's less control. Twitter has been learning for years about how it was used, where that led to good, perhaps what we might consider good results socially, but certainly where it was leading to bad results socially. They're bound by certain laws that don't allow specific things in specific countries. Again, in the US, you're not allowed to have child pornography on any media, that sort of thing. So what I think people are scared of is that we just don't know. It will take the reins off of some kinds of political violence, but it will also, there was moderation that was making it a little harder to do things such as what happened earlier in things like the Arab Spring and stuff like that, where social media platforms were used to organize things. Black Lives Matter, it was a huge aspect of what, as you mentioned before, Black Twitter. So again, will it inspire positive social change or negative social change? I think what people are mostly concerned about is that it's become uncontrolled. Obviously, people tend to be more worried about the increase in violence because that has a stronger impact on people and on each other. Musk claims he wants to control that. We haven't seen that yet.
We are hearing from activists and advocates on the ground that point to a wealth of examples of how social media has enabled and enhanced political and ethnic and religious conflicts. For example, mob killings in India to civil war in Ethiopia. So these are some of the things that we'll be exploring more in our show. And we thank Professor James for being here and being a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to talk about something so important.
That was Dr. James Hendler. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.